What you're about to hear wasn't supposed to make it into court, but on day 12 of Diddy's federal trial, one sealed document changed everything. The gallery fell silent. The judge looked stunned, because inside that envelope was Donald Trump's signature. Not from his presidency, from last month. A full pardon prepared in advance. And the person who uncovered it wasn't a prosecutor, wasn't a journalist. It was someone Trump never expected to see again, his former fixer. And he wasn't alone. Day 12 of the federal trial against Sean Diddy Combs was already headline material. Confiscated phones, hidden vaults, a sealed room mentioned in 3 separate testimonies. But no one in that courtroom was prepared for what happened at exactly 9:03 a.m. A court clerk entered pushing a metal cart. On it sat a fireproof evidence box, wrapped in yellow chain, tagged with 3 separate security codes. Judge Madsen raised an eyebrow. No one had seen this entered into the docket. No motion, no subpoena, no chain of custody. And then the prosecutor stood. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm but loaded, "this was submitted under emergency seal. We request the court unseal Exhibit 24D in open session." The judge hesitated only for a second. "Proceed." The clerk sliced the lock. The gallery leaned in. Cameras, banned from the room, weren't needed. Every journalist present would remember this moment with photographic clarity. Inside the box was an envelope, cream-colored, heavy stock, gold embossed, and when the prosecutor lifted it, gently, reverently, it revealed the unmistakable crest of the executive office of the President of the United States. Gasps, audible now, from the gallery, the jury, even one of the defense attorneys. The prosecutor unfolded it carefully and read a single line. If convicted in federal court, Sean John Combs is to be issued full executive clemency under the authority of the President of the United States, effective immediately upon return to office. Dated, stamped, signed, Donald J. Trump. The room stopped moving, not because the signature was old, but because the date wasn't from his presidency. It was from 4 weeks ago, April 2025, and underneath the signature, hand-scrawled in black ink. "We don't let our people fall. Diddy kept secrets from me. This is me keeping one for him." The judge stared forward, speechless. Then the gallery doors creaked open. And that's when it happened. Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former fixer, long disgraced, long ignored, walked through the back of the room, escorted by 2 federal marshals. He wore no tie, no smile, just a tan folder in his hand. The prosecutor turned. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to call our next witness out of order." The judge, still pale, nodded once. And as Michael Cohen took the stand, the entire courtroom understood. This trial wasn't just about Diddy anymore. It was about something bigger. Because the pardon in that envelope, it wasn't about justice. It was about leverage. And Donald J. Trump had just stepped into the trial of the century without ever entering the room. Michael Cohen hadn't been seen in a courtroom like this in years. Not since the hearings. Not since the prison sentence. Not since the fall. But now, without warning, he was back. He walked in slowly, flanked by federal marshals, holding nothing but a worn tan folder. No tie, no smirk, just the look of a man who had already lost everything, and now had nothing left to protect but the truth. He took the stand, swore the oath, sat down, and then he spoke. In April of this year, he began, "I was contacted by a mutual acquaintance of mine and Sean Combs, a former entertainment attorney. We'd worked together before. Quietly, he told me Diddy was getting nervous. There were things in discovery he never thought would surface." He paused, scanning the room. You could hear the hum of the overhead lights. They wanted insurance. Not legal cover. Not a statement. A promise. From Trump. A pre-written pardon. In case the trial went bad. The jury didn't react, but only because they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Cohen said the meeting was arranged in under 48 hours. No texts. No emails. A burner phone, a private jet, and a black SUV waiting on the tarmac. Destination, Bedminster. No aides were present. No Secret Service. Just Trump, seated in a dark-paneled library with a glass of bourbon and a single question. "What does Diddy have that could hurt me?" Cohen looked right at him. If you have to ask, he told Trump, you already know. Trump didn't laugh. He didn't flinch. He just stared out the window. Then, wordlessly, he opened the drawer beside him, pulled out a pen, and began writing. It wasn't a draft, Cohen told the court. It wasn't hypothetical. He signed the pardon right there, dated it, sealed it, and slid it across the table. The prosecutor leaned forward. What did he say after that? Cohen didn't hesitate. He said, we don't let our people fall. Diddy's been loyal. He's kept things quiet for years. This is me keeping it quiet for him. Then, quietly, Cohen reached into his folder and held up a photograph, an image of the signed document, time-stamped and geolocated. Exhibit 24E. The judge reviewed it, verified the signature, and for a full minute, no one said a word. Because the implications were clear. This wasn't just favoritism. This wasn't just corruption. This was a former president offering preemptive protection to a man on trial for one of the darkest conspiracies in entertainment history. Not because he believed in his innocence, but because he feared what he might reveal. And now, the courtroom understood why this trial felt different. Because somewhere beneath the vaults and threats and hidden girls, there was another name buried in the silence. And that name was Donald J. Trump. And he'd just been pulled into the light. The courtroom hadn't moved in 10 minutes. The air felt heavier. The silence wasn't out of respect. It was fear. Fear of what might come next. And then the prosecutor rose again. Your Honor, she said, we'd like to introduce Exhibit 24F into evidence. A black binder was carried to the witness stand. Leather-bound. No markings. Just one detail. A thin strip of red wax along the edge. Broken, as if someone had opened it for the first time in years. Cohen identified it immediately. That's the binder. Trump's personal off-books folder. I only ever saw it once before. He called it his insurance drawer. The judge granted permission to proceed. Inside were no digital files. No USB drives. Just printed emails. Handwritten notes. Post-it tabs. Every page carefully numbered. At first, it looked like chaos. But the deeper the prosecutor went, the clearer the structure became. Each tab was labeled. Media, NDAs, leverage, Combs, and then the final one. They opened to the marked section. Inside, an envelope. Cream stock. Same seal. But this one was handwritten. On Trump's personal stationery, it read, if this circus ever reaches me, your silence will be rewarded. You've seen worse from others. But if I go down, you go down. The room didn't gasp this time, because they were beyond surprise. This wasn't speculation. This wasn't rumor. This was written proof. A direct quid pro quo from a former president to a man now on trial for orchestrating an industry-wide silence campaign. But what shook the courtroom wasn't the note. It was what came next. The prosecutor slowly turned the page beneath the letter. There, in tight courier font, was a list of names. No context. No descriptions, just first names and last initials. But even redacted, some were unmistakable. M. Trump, I. Trump, J. Kushner, R. Murdoch, S. Combs, and halfway down the list, the girl from Palm Beach. The courtroom froze. The prosecutor looked directly at Cohen. Have you seen this list before? He nodded once. That was the blacklist. Not for people to be punished, but for people who needed to be protected. Buried. Paid off. Watched. Why include a girl from Palm Beach? Cohen took a long breath. She was an event. Young. Too young. She had no name at the time. But the footage exists. And if it ever got out, everything would collapse. The judge called for a short recess. But no one moved, because the picture was getting clearer. Trump hadn't just signed a pardon. He hadn't just offered cover. He was part of the mechanism. And the binder? That was the blueprint. A playbook written in whispers and payouts. And somewhere between the pages, between the names and sealed photos and buried warnings, there was a girl. Nameless. Forgotten. Protected not out of care, but out of fear. Because if she ever spoke, the machine wouldn't just stall. It would crash. And now the court understood. This trial wasn't spiraling. It was finally arriving at its core. The judge reconvened court at 11:27 a.m. But the energy in the room hadn't returned. It wasn't just tension anymore. It was recognition. Everyone, jury, press, even the defense, understood what the last exhibit implied. This wasn't a coincidence of power. It was a coordination of it. The prosecutor stepped forward and introduced Exhibit 24H, a visitor log, hand-copied from a Mar-a-Lago concierge's private ledger. The date, March 2nd, 2018. The names, Donald Trump, Sean Combs, an unnamed media executive, and one name still under federal redaction. Then Cohen spoke again. That was the night they made the deal, he said. The one that was never supposed to make it to paper. But I was there. I poured the drinks. He described the room. Not the Oval Office, not the dining hall, but the private cigar lounge behind the trophy case, 2 floors down from the public areas. No phones, no staff, just low lighting, ashtrays, and what they called legacy insurance. The prosecutor asked him to explain the term. Legacy insurance, Cohen said, was code. It meant material, evidence, files, photos, recordings. Anything that could be used to force silence or maintain loyalty. The idea was simple. If someone talked, the vault opened. And the vault? It wasn't in Mar-a-Lago. It was offshore. Cohen testified that Combs brought something that night, a USB drive. Locked, encrypted, with just one word written on a sticker across the top. Mirrors. He told Trump it was a sample. Proof that what happened in certain rooms, from Palm Beach to Los Angeles, wasn't myth. It was archived. Trump didn't even ask what was on it, Cohen said. He just asked where the rest was stored. The deal was made by dessert. Combs would ensure silence from the entertainment side. Models, dancers, actresses, influencers. Trump would offer protection. Not just legal, political, financial, reputational. Everyone in the room had something to lose. And that was the currency, mutual compromise. What one man couldn't hide, the other would erase. The prosecutor leaned in. Mr. Cohen, why come forward now? He stared forward, unblinking. Because the insurance policy expired the moment someone leaked the binder. And once that happened, I knew they'd need a new fall guy. And you believe that would be you? No, he said. I believed it would be her. The prosecutor asked, her who? Cohen turned slowly toward the gallery. She was at Mar-a-Lago that night. Not in the lounge, but in the other room. The room with the mirrors. She was listed as catering staff. But she never worked another event again. He took out a photo. Grainy. Cropped. A woman walking past an open door. No name. Just a timestamp. March 2nd, 2018. 11:16 p.m. The judge studied it. The jury didn't blink. And the defense? They didn't object. Because no one could. Not anymore. The legacy insurance was real. The girl existed. And the cover-up had a name, a signature, and now a witness. The machine hadn't just failed. It had been seen. They called her name softly. Liana Carr. No reaction from a gallery. No photos online. No scandals. No bylines. Just a woman in a navy dress, maybe early 30s, with her hair pulled back and her hands trembling as she took the oath. She sat, adjusted the microphone, and looked down at her lap before saying a word. I was 19. I just started working for a catering company in Florida. One of our regular clients was Mar-a-Lago. She said she'd never been inside the main residence before that night. March 2nd, 2018. The same night listed in Exhibit 24H. I was scheduled for cocktail service. I had no idea who'd be there. They just said VIP lounge event. Nothing more. She arrived at 6:45 p.m., wore the standard black uniform, was assigned to the upstairs bar. But within an hour, she was pulled aside by a supervisor and told to float downstairs, an assignment she said wasn't on the shift list. They walked me through the back, down 2 flights. No signage, just a hallway with wood paneling and old portraits. I thought it was just for wine storage or something. Then she reached a door. No handle, just a brass buzzer and a keypad. Her supervisor entered the code. Inside was a lounge, dimly lit, glass ashtrays, jazz music playing faintly through recessed speakers. She noticed the mirrors first. All the walls had mirrors, she said, but something about them didn't feel right, like you couldn't see yourself clearly in them. She paused, took a breath. There were 3 men. I recognized one, Sean Combs. He didn't speak to me, just looked once, then looked away. She said Trump arrived later. She was already collecting glasses at that point. But it wasn't the men who scared her. It was what she saw as she exited the room. I had to go back upstairs for ice. When I came back down, the door was slightly open, and someone else was standing in the hallway. She paused again. Her voice cracked now. It was a girl, maybe 16, 17 tops, brown hair, pale. She wasn't in uniform. She wasn't a guest. She looked scared, confused. She had glitter on her arms, like she'd been at some kind of event. But her shoes were off, and she kept pulling at her bracelet like she wanted off. Liana continued past her, ice bucket in hand. She thought about stopping, asking if she was okay. But one of the security guys looked at me, like, don't. So I kept walking. She never saw the girl again. When the prosecutor asked if she reported it, she shook her head. No one would have believed me, and I needed the job. Then, quietly, she reached in her purse. I found this the next morning in the pocket of my apron. A broken bracelet. Plastic. Cheap. Still speckled with glitter. She placed it on the evidence table. Exhibit 24K. And for the first time that day, a juror wiped away a tear. Because the binder had names. The testimony had power. But this was the girl they forgot. It was 3:16 p.m. when the prosecution stood once more. No preamble, no build-up, just a flash drive held between two fingers. Your Honor, we request to enter into evidence Exhibit 25, an audio file recovered via subpoena from a secure messaging app used by Mr. Combs between 2021 and 2024. The courtroom tensed. Everyone in the gallery leaned forward. Even the judge braced slightly in his chair. Because this wasn't testimony. This was a voice. The prosecutor nodded to the technician. The speakers clicked on. And then it began. A man's voice. Low, calm, confident. Undeniably Sean Combs. You think I won't play it? I own the Red Room now. You do what we agreed, or I press send. A short pause. A faint click. Then another voice. Gravelly. Sharper. Slower. Donald J. Trump. Fine. You'll have your pardon. Just don't touch the girl in the photo. The room stopped breathing. You could hear a pin drop. Even the stenographer's keystrokes hesitated. The judge cleared his throat, but didn't speak. Because there was nothing to say. The jury, until now wide-eyed and absorbing, looked stunned. One juror even turned slightly toward the audio table, as if needing to confirm the sound was real. The prosecutor clicked again. Another clip. There are mirrors, Sean. Don't forget. They don't just reflect. They record. You think I don't have backups? Don't make me remind you. It was Trump again. The room was ice. Because what the courtroom had just heard wasn't just coordination. It was collusion. The President of the United States, once the most powerful man in the world, was caught on tape negotiating with a man now on trial for orchestrating secret retreats, missing girls, and a system built to erase witnesses. The pardon wasn't an act of mercy. It was protection. And now, the entire court knew what Trump had feared all along. That Diddy still had the tapes. Tapes from the Red Room. Tapes from the tunnels. Tapes that could bring them all down. The judge finally spoke. The content of these messages will be reviewed in full for authentication. But the jury may consider the gravity of the language. Gravitas wasn't the issue anymore. This wasn't about metaphors. Not about contracts or speculation. It was about one question. What was on the footage? And maybe more importantly, who else was in it? The prosecutor looked back at Cohen, who gave a small nod. That room with the mirrors, he said quietly. There was more than one. The defense remained silent. They had no questions, because anything they asked would only confirm what the jury now understood instinctively. This was no longer a story about reputation, celebrity, or political bias. This was about leverage, power held by blackmail, voices recorded in the dark, and a girl, still unnamed, who had become the one line even Donald Trump was afraid to cross. Because whatever happened in that room, it was never supposed to leave. But now, it had. The courtroom reconvened at 4:52 p.m. No one spoke. No one coughed. Even the gallery, restless just hours ago, now sat rigid, shoulders tense, hands gripping notebooks, mouths slightly open. Every person in that room knew they were nearing something final. The prosecutor stood slowly. She didn't even look at her notes. Your Honor, she said, we'd like to recall one final witness. She has waived anonymity and requested to testify publicly. The door opened at the rear of the courtroom. She stepped in quietly, blonde, mid-40s, businesslike, but her eyes carried something deeper, something carved by years of silence. She walked to the stand with no hesitation. Not arrogance, not defiance, just certainty. State your name, for the record. Danielle Madison. Occupation? Former executive assistant to Donald J. Trump from 2011 through 2013. The jury shifted. Someone scribbled a note. Others just watched. She was calm, measured, not performing, not shaking. The prosecutor approached, slowly. Miss Madison, do you recognize Exhibit 24F? She nodded. I typed it. Dictated by Mr. Trump. In his study. He told me it was just a thought, an idea in case things went south. But when I printed it, he signed it. Immediately. And what about the girl referenced in that document? Danielle paused. Her hand twitched slightly. I know who she is. Did you ever meet her? Yes. Ow. Silence. Then she said it. Because I was her. The courtroom didn't move. A wave of stillness passed through the room like a current. You could feel the world shift in that one sentence. I was the girl in the photograph, she said. The one in the hallway. The one he told Sean not to touch. She reached in her bag. Not a photo. Not a document. A dress tag. From a uniform she wore that night. She had kept it for years. Tucked in a safe, behind a false wall in her home. This was the only thing I left with. I wasn't on payroll. I wasn't in any guest book. But I was there. The prosecutor asked her to elaborate. So she did. I had just turned 20. I was working part-time on campaign scheduling. They asked me to attend a private donor engagement in Palm Beach. I thought it was a networking opportunity. It wasn't. She described the hallway, the mirrors, the bracelet. The moment Diddy looked at her and asked, she knew. And Trump's answer, not for you. There was no heroism in her escape. No chase. No whistleblower moment. Just a retreat, a quiet resignation, a job overseas a month later, and silence. For years. Until now. I came back because I saw the list, because I heard the tape, because I realized they didn't just count on my silence. They counted on me disappearing. She turned toward the jury. I didn't disappear. And then, one last time, she looked at the judge. They wrote my silence into their system, into their deals, into their campaigns. She folded her hands. But I kept one thing they never expected me to hold on to, my memory. A beat. Then the prosecutor asked, is there anything else you'd like to say for the record? Danielle exhaled slowly. Yes. They always assumed I was the secret. She looked at the defense. But I was the witness. And with that, the trial didn't end. But the silence did.